It and hashtag 039, A difficult life, too. Indeed, both an affluent and an unprivileged harsh life are possible. However, yours was by no means a prosperous one. Greetings from our channel. Charles Bronson wasn't and hashtag 039, your typical glitzy hero with a dapper suit and a bright smile. Rather, he was the man on film with the piercing eyes, the weathered face, and the quiet but commanding demeanor. He expressed his feelings with few words. One look was enough to convey his anguish, rage, and ferocious resolve. Few people are aware, however, that Charles Bronson and hashtag 039's life was characterized by innumerable tribulations, hidden wounds, and a strong, stoic facade. Make sure to watch this video through to the finish if you and hashtag 039 are a fan of Charles Bronson and want to know the true story behind his life. We will walk you through the hardships of his impoverished youth, the secrets he concealed throughout his life and his meteoric triumph on the big screen. Childhood and a life of poverty. Born Charles Charlie Dennis Bukinski on November 3, 1921, Charles Bronson was the 11th child in a big family of 15. His parents, Mary Walensky and Valteris Bukinski, were immigrants from Lithuania who immigrated to the U.S. in pursuit of a better life. They made their home in Johnstown, Pennsylvania and hashtag 039's Allegheny coal mining area, where Valteris was employed as a miner. Valteris changed his name to Walter Bukinski in an attempt to fit in with American culture, believing that a more American name would improve the family and hashtag 039's luck. But Charles Bronson and hashtag 039's family never had it easy. They struggled to make ends meet while living in a small house. And Charlie had a difficult and impoverished upbringing. Since he didn't and hashtag 039 know a word of English when he first entered school, language was a major obstacle for him. Charlie learned Lithuanian, the only language used by the family at home. He spoke with such a strong accent that, even after he became fluent in English, his fellow soldiers believed he was not an American but from another nation when he entered the military. English, Lithuanian, Russian, and Greek were the four languages that Charlie spoke. But Charlie had to deal with a lot of difficulties, and the language barrier was just one of them. He admitted in a 1973 interview that he wasn't and hashtag 039 sure if he should love or hate Valteris, his father. Charlie hardly ever got to spend time with him, and the kids would always find a way to hide when Valteris came home. The family was left in even greater poverty and misery after his father died from health problems related to his job in the coal mines. Charlie, at 10 years old, had to assume the family and hashtag 039's responsibilities after his father passed away by following in his father and hashtag 039's footsteps into the coal mines. Charlie took the job despite being much too young for such hard labor, receiving a pitiful compensation of $1 for every ton of coal he and his team assisted in extracting. Bronson and hashtag 039's memory of those days was permanently altered. He took on the riskiest and most taxing jobs a child could be given in order to earn an additional $1 a week by volunteering for double shifts. Young Charlie battled headaches and the lingering fear of tight spaces, a phobia that Bronson stayed with him throughout his life, while working in the dim, claustrophobic mines. The Bronson family was so impoverished that they were unable to buy milk for their younger children. Charlie frequently went hungry himself, and his mother had to make them cold tea instead. Due to a shortage of clothing, Charlie occasionally had to wear his sister and hashtag 039's outfits to school, which meant he had to put up with his classmates and hashtag 039 jeers. Bronson persisted in his academic endeavors in spite of the difficulties and mockery. Being the first child in his family to complete high school was a noteworthy accomplishment for a young coal miner who put in a lot of effort to provide for his family. In addition to making Charles Bronson tough and tenacious, the long days in the mines left him with emotional and physical wounds. In addition to overcoming hardship, Bronson, a destitute kid with seemingly no future, also took important lessons in resiliency and tenacity with him. These traumatic events laid the groundwork for the man who would go on to represent courage and tenacity on the big screen in Hollywood. A career in acting, a path from adversity to success. After 12 years of hard work in the coal mines, Charles Bronson departed in 1943 at the age of 22 to join the U.S. During World War II, he served in the Air Force, first with the 760th Flexible Gunnery Squadron and then, in 1945, with the 61st Bombardment Squadron, which was based in Guam, as a gunner on a Boeing B-29 Superfortress. His task was to conduct airstrikes against islands in Japan. He received the Purple Heart after suffering injuries during one of these trips. This was a life-changing event, and it was this actual fighting experience that made him the most battle-hardened actor in war movies when he subsequently became Charles Bronson. Charlie came home after the war and worked at a variety of occupations to support himself. He didn't and #039 start to discover a new path until he joined a Philadelphia theater group. To further his love of the arts, he and his friend, stage actor Jack Klugman, rented an apartment in New York. Charlie arrived to Hollywood in 1950 after getting married and started taking acting classes. He initially only had small parts, co-starring in boxing movies and TV series with celebrities like Lee Marvin, Red Skelton, and Roy Rogers. Charlie started to get additional parts in movies including Miss Sadie Thompson, House of Wax, Riding Shotgun, and most notably Tennessee Champ and Crime Wave because of director Andre de Toth and #039's interest in him. But his Hollywood career was hampered by his Eastern European-sounding last name, Baczynski. He changed his name to Charles Bronson at the suggestion of his agent. This moniker became a permanent part of the history of film starting in 1954. Charles Bronson didn't and #039 get his first major job until 4 years later, and that was just in the ABC series Man with a Camera, when he played Detective Mike Kovac. He also started to get noticed by the movie business, which offered him a part in John Sturges and #039 1959 picture Never So Few. Bronson, meantime, kept landing the main parts in other TV series. John Sturges contacted him one day and said, "I need 7 leads for an epic cowboy movie. Do you want to?" With a cast that included Yul Brynner, Steve McQueen, James Coburn, Brad Dexter, Horst Buchholz, Robert Vaughn, and Charles Bronson, that movie was The Magnificent Seven, released in 1960. In his career, this was a significant turning point. Charles Bronson, Steve McQueen, and James Coburn were among the 3 members of the Magnificent Seven who were invited to return for John Sturges and #039's directing of The Great Escape, one of the best war movies ever made. In addition to earning him $50,000, Bronson and #039's portrayal of Bernardo O and #039 Riley in The Magnificent Seven made him a well-liked celebrity in the United States and Europe. However, Bronson continued to be typecast in Hollywood television parts despite his success in 2 John Sturges films. He didn't and #039 get his first big-screen major role until 1965, when he starred in Guns of Diablo. And Bronson didn't and #039 really become well-known in Hollywood until 1967, when he starred in The Dirty Dozen. The European cinema industry held Charles Bronson in high regard, despite his career in the U.S. taking a while to take off. In the English title Honor of Thieves, he co-starred with Alain Delon in the lead role of Adu El and #039 Ami, which was sought after by French film. Bronson and #039's representative remembered their comment during negotiations with French producers in 1968, and quote, "In Europe, we care more about a character and #039's personality than their looks," end quote. Bronson and #039's role of the gunman who played a harmonica in Sergio Leone and #039's Once Upon a Time in the West that same year became a classic. End quote. With Delon as the attractive hero, Bronson served as the perfect contrast, the rugged but captivating veteran, end quote. For a variety of reasons, Bronson turned down Leone and #039's initial request to play the lead in A Fistful of Dollars, and Clint Eastwood eventually took over. With a series of hit movies including Guns for San Sebastian, France, Lola, and The Last Supper, Bronson and #039's career in Europe began to take off. UK, particularly France and #039's Rider in the Rain, which took home the 1970 Golden Globe for Best Foreign Picture. Because Bronson was constantly cast in the lead roles of big-budget projects, it appeared that European film recognized his brilliance more than Hollywood did. One of his most enduring accomplishments was working with Alain Delon on the 1971 movie Red Sunday. Hollywood finally acknowledged Charles Bronson and #039's skill in 1972. Michael Winner directed 3 consecutive films that he acted in: The Mechanic, The Stone Killer, and Chateau and #039's Land. At 52 years old, Bronson earned $1 million a film by 1973, making him one of the most paid performers in the world. He also started his well-known Death Wish series at this time, which included 5 movies spread across 20 years. According to critic Stephen Hunter, Bronson embodies stoicism, manly vigor, and strength. Bronson didn't and #039 have to do much to command the screen and attract everyone and #039's attention. According to Bronson, I and #039 am just a product, like a bar of soap, and I and #039 am sold as best I can. In an interview with critic Roger Ebert from 1974. Bronson realized that his ability to control the screen with his distinct dominating presence was more powerful than his ability to deliver long dialogue or intricate performances. Relationships and personal life. Charles Bronson, who frequently portrayed himself as severe and unyielding on screen, had his own unspoken traumas. His initial union with actress Harriet Tendler appeared to be a positive start for both of them. During the early years of Bronson and #039's quest to establish himself in Hollywood, Harriet supported him. But like many love tales, their distance from one another grew over time, particularly when Bronson and #039's career took off and his celebrity increased. Even though Suzanne and Tony had 2 kids together, their marriage was unable to adapt to the changes and ultimately failed. Following the dissolution of his marriage to Harriet, Bronson married actress Jill Ireland in 1965. Ireland had recently divorced actor David McCallum. Bronson and Ireland and #039's relationship was frequently characterized as a special fusion of compassion and strength. In addition to being his life partner, Ireland was also his acting partner. Over their careers, the two appeared in 15 films together. In addition to her brilliance and beauty, Jill Ireland enthralled Charles Bronson with her steadfast fortitude during a terrible fight with cancer. Following Ireland and #039's 1984 breast cancer diagnosis, Bronson left his job to focus entirely on taking care of his wife. He turned into her unwavering rock, supporting her through the anguish and agony that came with the therapies. Bronson never left Ireland and #039's side while she lived out her last years, providing for all of her needs with a kindness and affection that few witnessed in the typically stern and unyielding actor. In addition to the pleasures of love and professional achievement, Bronson and #039's personal life was also replete with devastating catastrophes. When their adopted son, Jason, died of substance abuse in 1989, Bronson and Ireland were devastated. They had loved and raised Jason as their own, but he fell prey to the drug and #039's hold. His passing was a devastating blow to the family, particularly to Ireland, who had been concerned about her son and #039's future for a long time. She once admitted that Jason was her biggest concern and that she felt as like she had lost a piece of her own life in addition to a kid when he passed away. After a protracted fight with cancer, Jill Ireland also died in May 1990, only 6 months after Jason. There was a huge hole in Bronson and #039's heart after her passing. In addition to losing his cherished wife, he had also lost his best friend, with whom he had spent so many years sharing both the highs and lows of life. Bronson took a few years off from his work as a result of this devastating loss. He withdrew from the limelight of Hollywood and spent his time with his remaining family, living in the profound grief of these losses. The true self and the secrets that are kept buried. Charles Bronson was always portrayed on cinema as tough and icy, frequently portraying characters who behaved decisively and talked little. However, few were aware that Bronson had a rich inner life and was a highly sensitive man beneath this strong facade. His passion for painting and sculpture, which he pursued during his quiet times, stood in sharp contrast to his gritty, violent parts. To avoid being noticed because of his celebrity, he sold several of his paintings under his true name, Charles Bronson. Moreover, Bronson was prone to exaggerating tales about his history. He frequently told stories about exciting exploits and dramatic fights, although a lot of them were made up. It might have been his method of creating a mythical character, a man whose real life appeared to be as legendary as his fictional personas. People who knew Bronson well realized that beneath these stories was a lonely man who was very different from the violent characters he played in movies. Bronson and #039's sensitivity to art was matched by his intense dread of disease, which made him highly wary of anything that might infect him. He avoided shaking hands with people because he was so worried about his health and wanted to stop the transmission of germs. His psychological makeup was also greatly influenced by his fear of fire. In order to have a rapid escape in the event of a fire, Bronson always stayed in a room on the ground floor or the lowest level when he was in a hotel. Only after he had left the limelight and spent his last years in seclusion did these peculiarities and fears become apparent. Charles Bronson gained a reputation for being challenging over his career and frequently ran afoul of directors and co-workers. His arguments and disputes on site were the subject of numerous stories. Unafraid to express his views, Bronson occasionally criticized filmmakers directly if he didn't and #039t like the way things were going. One such instance was his heated exchange with director Nicholas Gessner, whom Bronson publicly chastised. Because of this, he was seen by many as irritable and challenging to deal with. But some who knew Bronson well saw another side. Despite his often distant demeanor, they said he was a good-hearted man. In one touching tale, on Kurt Russell and #039's 12th birthday, Bronson presents him with a high-end skateboard. Russell had given Bronson a tiny remote-controlled airplane for his birthday at the time, and the two were working together on a movie. Bronson seemed unconcerned at first, but a few months later he gave Russell the heartfelt present as a surprise. Kurt was stopped from using his skateboard by a security guard on set, but Bronson immediately defended the youngster and said they would skate around the set together. These disparate tales present a nuanced portrait of Charles Bronson as a guy with a kind and caring heart hidden beneath his often icy appearance. Like the movies he starred in, his life was complex and full of unexpected turns. Legacy and subsequent profession. Following the passing of his cherished spouse, Jill Ireland, in 1990, Charles Bronson and #039's life became more subdued and reflective. He withdrew from the limelight he had been a part of for decades because of the anguish of losing her. Actress Kim Weeks, his third wife, provided him with some solace, but the happiness of this new chapter was insufficient to stop his deteriorating health. After being diagnosed with Alzheimer and #039's disease in his senior years, Bronson gradually lost the power and memory that had characterized him throughout his life and career. His health steadily deteriorated, and he eventually lost the ability to identify his loved ones. Due to this disease, Bronson had to give up acting, and in 1999, he made his last appearance on screen in the television film Family of Cops 3. At the age of 81, Charles Bronson died of pneumonia at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles in 2003. Globally, his fans, friends, and family grieved his passing. Bronson had a lasting impression on viewers despite the fact that his acting career had ended years earlier. In addition to his remarkable filmography, Bronson left behind a sizable corpus of work that he created under his given name. Bronson, Charles. In addition to showcasing his artistic ability, his paintings and sculptures provided a window into the delicate and profound soul of a man who had experienced numerous tragedies and adversities in his lifetime. Few celebrities can match Charles Bronson and #039's remarkable career total of over 90 film appearances. Because of his depictions of rugged, stoic warriors, he rose to fame in the action genre. Characters who expressed a great deal of humanity and strength despite speaking little. Bronson continuously represented a distinct and recognizable presence in movies, from the contentious Death Wish series to iconic westerns like The Magnificent Seven. Bronson was a representation of tenacity and resolve in addition to strength. Despite having a challenging journey to stardom, he went from being a poor youngster in Pennsylvania to becoming one of Hollywood and #039's biggest actors. His career is more than just a tale of individual achievement. It is evidence of the ability to rise above modest beginnings through tenacity and self-belief. Anyone attempting to overcome misfortune can find encouragement in Bronson and #039's story. Beyond his iconic movies, Charles Bronson left behind a legacy. The human values he portrayed in his parts are what make it so. In a turbulent world, he frequently depicted men who battled for justice, morality, and the pursuit of truth. In addition to inspiring performers who came after, Bronson and #039's performances served as a source of motivation for regular individuals battling their own personal struggles. Charles Bronson is no longer with us, yet his legacy lives on. In addition to being an actor, he was a representation of bravery, tenacity, and the capacity to overcome obstacles in life. His teachings will always play a significant role in the development of international film. What quality about Charles Bronson most appeals to you? What, in your perspective, set him apart throughout his 90 film roles? Let and #039's continue the discussion by exchanging ideas in the comments section below. For more tales on the iconic figures you adore, Don and #039, forget to subscribe to our channel. We appreciate you viewing our video, and we hope to see you in the future one.